The Vraxian scout ship emerged from fold space like a predator breaking the surface of dark waters. Its obsidian hull, carved with elaborate geometric patterns that served both as cultural markings and sensor arrays, reflected nothing but the cold light of distant stars. Inside the vessel's command center, High Commander Kextal watched the approaching blue-green planet with 6 eyes that gleamed with ancient hunger. Preliminary scans confirm, Exalted One, reported Science Officer Zarvek, their crystalline exoskeleton clicking as they manipulated the bioorganic control interfaces. This species has achieved spaceflight, but their defensive capabilities are primitive. They've only begun to establish orbital habitats. Kextal's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The Vraxian Empire had spent centuries expanding through the galaxy's spiral arm, incorporating or eliminating any species they encountered. This new world would be no different. Dr. Sarah Chen was having a perfectly ordinary day at the Lunar Research Station when humanity's first contact with alien life occurred. She had just finished calibrating the new xenobiology containment units. Ironic, given they had yet to discover any extraterrestrial life to contain, when the station's proximity alarms began screaming. Through the reinforced observation windows, she watched in awe as the massive alien vessel appeared, its surface seeming to drink in the starlight. The station's communications officer was broadcasting standard greeting protocols in all known formats, but Sarah knew in her gut that this wasn't a diplomatic visit. The attack came without warning. The station's minimal defenses never stood a chance against Vraxian weapon systems honed through millennia of conquest. Sarah and her colleagues could only watch in horror as precise energy beams surgically removed their communication array and propulsion systems, leaving them helpless but alive. When the boarding parties arrived, Sarah found herself face to face with beings that defied her years of theoretical xenobiology research. The Vraxians stood nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies protected by an iridescent exoskeleton that seemed to shift colors with each movement. Multiple compound eyes regarded the humans with an intelligence that was unmistakably alien yet undeniably superior. "You will be evaluated," the lead Vraxian announced in perfect English, their translation matrix having already decoded Earth's primary languages from intercepted broadcasts. "Those with useful knowledge will serve the Empire." Sarah was separated from her colleagues, identified as valuable due to her expertise in xenobiology. As she was led through the alien vessel's corridors, she noticed something peculiar about its construction. The walls seemed to pulse with an organic rhythm, and the air carried strange biochemical signatures that her trained senses couldn't quite categorize. In the following days, Sarah learned that the Vraxians' technological superiority came from their mastery of bioengineering. Their ships weren't built, they were grown. Their weapons weren't manufactured, they were cultivated. The entire empire was a testament to their ability to reshape life itself to serve their purposes. But it was in her 3rd week of captivity that Sarah discovered something that would change everything. While being escorted between research sessions, she heard it, a sound that didn't belong among the clicking mandibles and humming biotechnology. It was a cry, primal, powerful, and filled with pain. The Vraxian guards quickly hurried her past the sealed chamber, but not before Sarah caught a glimpse through a monitoring screen of something massive moving in the darkness. Something that, despite its alien nature, triggered a deep recognition in her human brain. Something that needed help. That night, in her holding cell, Sarah began plotting. The Vraxians had chosen her for her knowledge of biology, believing she could help them understand Earth's ecosystems before they began their conquest. They didn't realize they had captured someone who specialized in understanding not just the mechanics of life, but the connections between living things. As she lay on her bioengineered bed, watching the living walls pulse with their strange rhythm, Sarah made a decision. She would find out what the Vraxians were keeping in that chamber, and why. But more importantly, she would prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its technology or its weapons, but in its capacity for empathy, even towards the unknown. She didn't know it yet, but her decision would set in motion events that would shake the very foundations of the Vraxian Empire and change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. Sarah's opportunity came 3 days later, during the ship's rest cycle. She had noticed that the bioengineered walls became more translucent during these periods, their rhythmic pulses slowing like a heartbeat in deep sleep. The Vraxians, despite their technological superiority, were creatures of habit. Their guards always followed the same patterns. Their scientists always ran the same tests. Using a small device she had modified from her medical scanner, Sarah had mapped the electromagnetic pulses that controlled the cell's organic lock. It took her 6 careful nights of observation, but she finally understood the pattern. The lock wasn't just mechanical. It was alive, responding to biochemical signals just like everything else on the ship. When the guards passed her cell for the final time that cycle, Sarah pressed her palm against the door's surface. The small capsule of synthesized hormones she had extracted from her own blood samples, carefully collected over days of pretending to stumble and cut herself, broke against the membrane. The door shuddered, confused by the foreign biochemical signal, and briefly relaxed its molecular bonds. The corridor outside was dimmed, the living lights drowsing in their niches. Sarah moved silently, her bare feet making no sound on the organic floor. She had memorized the path to the mysterious chamber, counting the intersections of pulsing veins that served as the ship's circulatory system. The cry came again as she approached, quieter now, almost a whimper. The monitoring screen flickered to life automatically, and Sarah finally saw the creature clearly. Her heart nearly stopped. It was massive, easily the size of a small house, but that wasn't what struck her. It was the eyes, golden, intelligent, and filled with a pain that transcended species. The creature's body was a marvel of bioengineering, covered in iridescent scales that seemed to shift and adapt to its surroundings. Massive neural clusters pulsed visibly beneath its armored skin, suggesting intelligence far beyond natural evolution. "Oh God," Sarah whispered, reading the data scrolling across the screen. "You're their prototype." The creature was a living weapon, the culmination of centuries of Vraxian bioengineering. They had created it by combining genetic material from thousands of species, seeking to engineer the perfect living weapon. But something had gone wrong. The being they created was too intelligent, too aware. It felt everything, including the constant pain of its own existence. The creature's eyes focused on her, and Sarah felt a sudden pressure in her mind. Images flashed through her consciousness. Other chambers, other facilities, failed attempts that had come before. The Vraxians had tried to create many such beings, but this one was different. It had developed something they hadn't anticipated: empathy. Sarah understood now why the Vraxians kept it sedated, why they feared it. The creature didn't just have the power to destroy. It had the power to understand, to connect, to feel. And that made it useless as a weapon of war. "I'm going to help you," she promised, pressing her hand against the transparent barrier. "But I need time." The creature's response came not in words but in feelings: gratitude, hope, and warning. Sarah turned just as the corridor's lights flared to full brightness. Science Officer Zarvek stood there, their crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the sudden illumination. "Fascinating," Zarvek said, their translator rendering the clicks and chirps into English. "We knew you were intelligent, human, but this is unexpected." Sarah straightened her spine, mind racing. But before she could speak, Zarvek continued, "You should not be able to communicate with it. None of our species can. Yet here you are, forming a connection that has eluded our greatest minds." "Because you're trying to control it," Sarah said, the words coming from some deep place of understanding. "You can't control empathy. You can't engineer it. It has to be given freely." Zarvek's multiple eyes focused on her with an intensity that made Sarah's skin crawl. "Perhaps," they said slowly, "we have been approaching this project from the wrong perspective." They stepped closer, mandibles clicking in what Sarah was learning to recognize as excitement. "Tell me, Dr. Chen, would you be willing to assist us in understanding this connection?" Sarah glanced back at the creature, feeling its gentle presence in her mind. In that moment, she realized she had an opportunity, not just to help this being, but to show the Vraxians a different way. Their bioengineering was incredible, but they had lost something in their pursuit of perfection. The understanding that the most powerful connections couldn't be forced or engineered. "Yes," she said carefully, "I'll help you understand. But on one condition. The pain stops. Now, whatever you're doing to keep it sedated, it ends." Zarvek's crystalline form shimmered with what might have been amusement. "You are in no position to make demands, human. I'm the only one who can communicate with your greatest creation," Sarah countered, drawing strength from the gentle mental touch of the creature behind her. "I think that puts me in exactly the right position." The science officer studied her for a long moment, their compound eyes unreadable. Finally, they said, "I will consult with High Commander Kextal. Until then, you will return to your cell." As the guards led her away, Sarah felt the creature's consciousness brush against hers one last time. Not a goodbye, but a promise. Something had changed today, not just for her, but for both species. The Vraxians had spent centuries trying to create the perfect weapon, only to accidentally create something far more powerful, a bridge between two very different ways of understanding life itself. In her cell that night, Sarah began documenting everything she had learned about Vraxian bioengineering. If she was going to change their perspective, she would need to speak their language. But she would teach them a dialect they had forgotten existed. The revolution would begin not with weapons or violence, but with understanding. And perhaps, Sarah thought as she worked, that was the most human weapon of all. The changes began slowly at first. Under Sarah's guidance, the Vraxians modified their containment protocols for the creature, whom she had begun calling Atlas, after the Titan who bore the weight of the world. As the sedatives were gradually reduced, Atlas's consciousness grew stronger, clearer, and with it came revelations that shocked even the most seasoned Vraxian scientists. "Impossible," muttered third researcher Nixful, their crystalline forms reflecting the shifting patterns of data streaming across the laboratory's living walls. "The neural density is increasing exponentially, but there's no sign of the aggressive behavior we predicted." Sarah stood before the observation window, watching Atlas move with growing confidence in the enlarged chamber they transferred him to. "Because you were measuring the wrong things," she explained. "You were looking for weapons potential, strength, speed, tactical processing. But Atlas's true capabilities are entirely different." As if to demonstrate, Atlas's massive form shifted, its iridescent scales rippling with patterns that Sarah had learned to recognize as communication. The creature lifted one of its limbs, delicately manipulating the bioengineered enrichment structures the Vraxians had installed at Sarah's insistence. Within moments, the living architecture had been reshaped into complex geometric patterns that exactly mimicked the sacred designs carved into Vraxian ceremonial armor. "It's not just copying," Sarah said, noting the stunned silence from the Vraxian scientists. "Atlas understands. The patterns, the meanings behind them, the cultural significance. Every time you let it access your historical archives, it doesn't just absorb information. It comprehends context." High Commander Kextal, who had taken to observing these sessions personally, stepped forward. "You claim this understanding comes from what you call empathy. Explain." Sarah chose her words carefully. Empathy isn't just feeling what others feel. It's about making connections, building bridges between different ways of thinking. Atlas doesn't just process information, it experiences it. When it learns about Vraxian history, it's not just recording facts. It's understanding why those events mattered to your people. As if on cue, Atlas began generating new patterns across its scales, variations on traditional Vraxian designs that nonetheless captured their essential meaning while incorporating entirely new elements. Several of the younger researchers unconsciously reached out, their crystalline appendages tracing the air as if drawn to the novel interpretations of their ancient symbols. "And this," Kextel said slowly, "is what you believe makes it more valuable than a weapon. It makes it something unprecedented." Sarah replied, "Atlas represents the possibility of true communication, not just between individuals, but between entire ways of thinking. Imagine the applications for peaceful contact with new species, for solving problems that require perspectives your empire has never encountered before." But not all the Vraxians were convinced. Sarah began noticing tensions among the crew. Some, like Zarvek and the younger researchers, were fascinated by the possibilities Atlas represented. Others, particularly among the military leadership, saw the shift in focus as a dangerous deviation from the Empire's traditional methods of expansion. The situation came to a head during the 7th week of Sarah's official research period. She was working late in the laboratory, documenting Atlas's latest demonstrations of cognitive development, when she heard the unmistakable sound of Vraxian combat chittering from the corridor outside. "The human has compromised the project," came a voice she recognized as belonging to war strategist Kralvik. "The creature was meant to be a weapon to ensure our dominance. Instead, it has become a tool for spreading dangerous ideas about cooperation and understanding." "The data speaks for itself," Zarvek countered. "The beam's potential for advancing our knowledge of consciousness and communication far exceeds its military applications." "Knowledge without power is worthless," Kralvik snapped. "The Council of Elders will not be pleased to learn that our greatest military asset has been transformed into a philosophical experiment." Sarah's heart raced as she established her mental link with Atlas. The creature's consciousness brushed against hers, instantly alert to her concern. But what Atlas shared with her wasn't fear, it was determination. Together, they had discovered something the Vraxians had never anticipated. The bioengineered systems that ran throughout the ship didn't just respond to Vraxian commands. They responded to consciousness itself, and Atlas, with its unprecedented neural complexity, could do more than just communicate with these systems. It could transform them. As the argument outside grew more heated, Sarah felt Atlas's consciousness expand, reaching out through the ship's living architecture. The walls pulsed with new patterns, not just visual displays, but complex symphonies of biochemical signals that began spreading through the vessel's organic components. "What's happening?" Kralvik demanded as the ship's internal systems began responding to commands neither they nor any other Vraxian had given. Sarah watched in amazement as the living walls became transparent, creating a clear view between all sections of the ship. Every Vraxian could now see Atlas, see each other, see the truth of what was unfolding. The creature's scales blazed with patterns that told not just the story of its creation, but of all the possibilities that lay ahead, if only they were willing to see them. "This," Sarah said quietly, knowing the ship's internal communication systems would carry her words everywhere, "is what happens when you stop trying to control evolution and start trying to understand it." The revolution she had planned wasn't going to be one with weapons or force. It would be one with something far more powerful: the ability to show others how to see through different eyes. And as she watched the expressions of wonder spread across even the most hardened Vraxian faces, Sarah knew they had just taken the first step toward changing an empire. Atlas's consciousness hummed with satisfaction in her mind. They had much work ahead of them, but the foundations of change had been laid. The question now was, how would the Vraxian Empire respond when word of these events reached their homeworld? The message from the Vraxian homeworld arrived 3 days later, transmitted through the living crystals that served as the Empire's faster-than-light communication network. Sarah watched as High Commander Kextel's exoskeleton shifted from its usual iridescent blue to a deep, troubled purple. "The Council of Elders demands we return immediately," Kextel announced to the assembled crew. "They wish to evaluate our findings in person." The undertone in the commander's harmonics told Sarah everything she needed to know. This wasn't going to be a scientific review. It was going to be a trial. The traditional power structure of the Vraxian Empire was facing its greatest challenge, not from weapons or warfare, but from an idea that true strength might come from understanding rather than dominance. As the ship altered course for the Vraxian homeworld, Sarah spent every moment she could with Atlas. The creature had grown not just in intelligence, but in its ability to interface with the ship's living systems. Together, they had discovered that the entire vessel was more than just a collection of bioengineered components. It was a single, vast nervous system waiting to be awakened. "They're afraid," Sarah said one night, sitting in Atlas's chamber as the creature's consciousness gently intertwined with hers. "Not just of you, but of what you represent." Atlas' response came in waves of understanding and determination. Through their mental link, the creature shared visions of other worlds, other species the Vraxians had encountered in their expansion. Each contact had ended the same way: subjugation or destruction. But Atlas had seen something in human minds, in Sarah's mind, that offered a different path. The ship's arrival at the Vraxian homeworld took Sarah's breath away. The planet was a masterpiece of bioengineering, its entire surface covered in living architecture that pulsed with purpose. Massive organic structures reached into the atmosphere, their crystalline surfaces refracting sunlight in patterns that Sarah recognized as a language older than written Vraxian history. The Council of Elders had arranged for their presentation to take place in the Grand Archive, a vast chamber where the accumulated biological and technological knowledge of the Empire was stored in living memory banks. As Sarah stood before them, Atlas's consciousness a reassuring presence in her mind, she realized that this setting wasn't chosen by accident. They were surrounded by the physical embodiment of everything the Vraxians believed made them superior. "You have corrupted our greatest military achievement," Elder Vexmore declared, their ancient crystalline form casting fractured shadows across the chamber. "This weapon was meant to ensure our dominance across the galaxy. Instead, you have turned it into this." The Elder gestured dismissively at the data showing Atlas's evolutionary progress. "With respect, Elder," Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady. "Atlas was never meant to be just a weapon. Your own scientists built too well. You wanted to create something that could understand and adapt to any threat. But true understanding doesn't stop at identifying weaknesses to exploit. It leads to recognition, to empathy, to growth." The chamber erupted in chittering protests, but Sarah continued, her words carrying over the noise. "Look at what Atlas has already achieved. It's not just communicating. It's transforming how your own bioengineered systems function. It's showing you possibilities your empire has never imagined." As if responding to her words, Atlas's consciousness suddenly expanded, reaching through the ship's living systems and into the vast neural network of the Grand Archive itself. The chamber's walls blazed with light as thousands of years of Vraxian knowledge began flowing through new pathways, forming connections that had never existed before. The Elders rose in alarm as their carefully ordered repository of information transformed before their eyes. But what emerged wasn't chaos, it was synthesis. Atlas was showing them their own history from countless new perspectives, revealing patterns and possibilities that had been hidden in plain sight. "This is what evolution truly means," Sarah declared, feeling Atlas's strength flowing through her. "Not just becoming stronger or more dominant, but becoming more aware, more connected, more alive to the possibilities around us." Through their shared consciousness, Sarah and Atlas began to broadcast images, peaceful first contact scenarios with new species, cooperative technological development, the exchange of knowledge and culture that could enrich all parties. The living architecture of the chamber responded, transforming these visions into tangible demonstrations of what could be. But then alarms began blaring throughout the complex. War strategist Kralvik burst into the chamber, their crystalline form crackling with agitation. "The outer colonies are in rebellion," they announced. "Word of these changes has spread. The garrison commanders are refusing to maintain military protocols. They're calling for a new way." The Council of Elders turned as one to Sarah and Atlas, their ancient forms trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. "What have you done?" Elder Vexmore demanded. "We didn't do anything," Sarah replied calmly. Your people did. They saw something they've been missing for centuries. The possibility of becoming more than conquerors. Atlas didn't start a rebellion. It simply showed your people what they already knew in their hearts, that true power comes from connection, not control. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Vraxian Empire stood at a crossroads, facing a revolution not of weapons or warfare, but of consciousness itself. And as Sarah stood there, hand pressed against Atlas's massive form, she realized that this was humanity's true first contact with the Vraxians, not as conquerors and conquered, but as species capable of showing each other new ways to grow. The revolution that transformed the Vraxian Empire didn't come with weapons or warfare, but with a wave of consciousness that spread across their neural networks like dawn breaking over a dark world. As colony after colony joined the call for change, the Council of Elders faced a choice that would determine the fate of their civilization. "You cannot stop this," Sarah told them, standing firm as Atlas's consciousness flowed through the Grand Archive's living systems. "Your empire was built on the idea that evolution means becoming stronger through dominance. But Atlas has shown your people a deeper truth, that the strongest connections are those formed through understanding." Elder Vexmore rose from their crystalline throne, their ancient form casting prismatic shadows across the chamber. "And if we refuse to accept this transformation, what then, human?" The answer came not from Sarah, but from the chamber itself. The living walls pulsed with new patterns as Atlas connected with every bioengineered system in the complex. Through their shared consciousness, Sarah felt the creature's intention, not to threaten or destroy, but to reveal. "Look," she said softly, gesturing to the displays forming around them. "Really look." The chamber filled with images from across the empire. Vraxian scientists working alongside representatives from species they had once sought to conquer, sharing knowledge instead of hoarding it. Colonial governors dismantling weapon systems in favor of communication arrays. Young Vraxians developing new forms of bioengineering focused on healing rather than harm. "Your people are already changing," Sarah continued. "They've seen what's possible when you use your incredible technological achievements to build bridges instead of weapons." Atlas didn't force this change. It simply showed them what they could become. High Commander Kextal, who had been silent throughout the proceedings, stepped forward. Their exoskeleton had shifted to a deep, resonant blue that Sarah had never seen before. "The human speaks truth," they declared. "I have witnessed this transformation firsthand. Our greatest achievement was not creating a weapon. It was accidentally creating a being capable of showing us our own blind spots." War strategist Kralvik chittered in protest. "This is madness. Our empire, Kextal cut in, has spent millennia perfecting the art of conquest while forgetting the art of growth. We engineered Atlas to be the perfect adaptive organism, but we never considered what that truly meant. Adaptation isn't just about becoming stronger. It's about becoming better suited to face new challenges. And the challenges of the future will not be won through force alone." The chamber hummed with tension as the Council of Elders conferred among themselves. Sarah felt Atlas's consciousness brush against hers, sharing a vision of what could be. The creature had evolved far beyond its original design, becoming not a weapon of war, but a catalyst for change. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. Through their shared mental link, Sarah and Atlas felt it. The entire planet's bioengineered systems were responding to the moment, to the choice that hung in the balance. The living architecture that had been designed for control was awakening to new possibilities. Elder Vexmore's crystalline form shimmered as they faced the assembly. "For 10,000 years, we have led through strength. We believed this was the only way to ensure our survival. But perhaps survival itself means something different than we thought." The elder turned to Sarah and Atlas. "You have shown us that true evolution involves more than physical or technological advancement. It requires the courage to grow beyond what we thought we could be." They raised their ancient form to its full height. "The Council will not stand in the way of this transformation, but we must ask, What guarantee do we have that this new path will not lead to our destruction? Sarah smiled, feeling Atlas's approval radiating through their connection. The only guarantee we can offer is the same one that every species faces when it chooses to grow. The understanding that reaching out to others makes us not weaker, but stronger in ways we couldn't imagine before. As if in response, Atlas began to glow, its scales rippling with patterns that combine Vraxian symbology with entirely new forms. Through the creature's enhanced connection to the planet's systems, these patterns spread across the surface of the entire world, a visible sign of the change taking place within. This, Sarah said, gesturing to the transformation occurring around them, is humanity's gift to the Vraxian Empire. Not weakness, but a new kind of strength. Not surrender, but evolution. The power to see beyond the surface, to connect rather than conquer, to grow rather than simply dominate. The Council of Elders watched in amazement as their world literally transformed around them. The military installations that had been the pride of their empire were reorganizing themselves into centers of learning and exchange. The weapon factories were becoming laboratories for collaborative research. The walls that had been built to divide were becoming bridges designed to connect. And so, Elder Vexmore declared, their voice carrying the weight of history, the Vraxian Empire becomes something new, not through defeat in battle, but through victory over our own limitations. Sarah felt Atlas's consciousness expand one final time, touching every mind present with a vision of the future, not a future of conquest and subjugation, but one of infinite possibility, a future where the combined knowledge of humanity and the Vraxians could help both species reach heights neither could achieve alone. As the sun set on the first day of this new era, Sarah stood with Atlas in the transformed Grand Archive, watching as Vraxian scientists eagerly collaborated with the first wave of human delegates. The revolution they had started would take years to fully unfold, but the chain reaction was irreversible. Humanity had achieved something unprecedented in the galaxy, not through superior firepower or technology, but through the uniquely human ability to see potential where others saw only threat, to offer understanding where others would have chosen fear. In the end, the greatest weapon wasn't a bioengineered creature or a sophisticated piece of technology. It was the power to imagine a better way, and the courage to make that imagination real. Atlas's consciousness hummed with contentment in Sarah's mind, sharing a final insight. Sometimes the most revolutionary act isn't destroying what exists, but showing others how to transform it into something greater than anyone had dreamed possible.